One day after a Houthi attack wounded 22 people in southern Israel, the IDF responded with their largest airstrike yet against a series of Houthi targets in Yemen. Meanwhile, Israel has expanded ground operations in Gaza City, and multiple Western nations have begun steps to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, starting with the Houthi attack in Israel a couple days ago, this is according to some reporting by Manny Fabian at the Times of Israel, where he says, quote, over 22 people were wounded on Wednesday evening after a drone launched by the Houthis in Yemen exploded in Eilat, days after another smashed into a hotel in the Red Sea resort city. Footage from the attack showed the drone impact near a hotel in a shopping area. The military acknowledged that attempts to intercept the drone had failed, with 2 Iron Dome interceptor missiles fired at the unmanned aircraft, while noting that sirens had sounded a warning of attack according to protocol. According to an initial probe by the IAF, Israeli Air Force, the drone was detected late. Though sirens were still activated by the Home Front Command to warn civilians, the failure of the Iron Dome to shoot down the drone was possibly because it was flying low, although this was still under investigation. Because of the late detection, Israel did not have enough time to dispatch helicopters or fighter jets to shoot it down. So it's been a while since we've seen Houthi drones impact inside of Israel. These are all, like, when you see them, they're relatively easy to intercept. They're slow moving, and there's been a very high success rate in terms of their interception by Israel since this conflict began. In this case, we'll wait for the details here, but it sounds like maybe they were flying in so low that they bypassed Israel's radar. The Houthis acknowledged this, putting out a statement saying, the Yemeni Armed Forces Unmanned Air Force carried out a military operation using 2 drones targeting 2 Israeli enemy targets in southern occupied Palestine. The operation successfully achieved its goal thanks to God, while interceptor systems failed to intercept it. Now, as soon as these drones went boom, everybody knew what was coming next, a large Israeli response. And that's what happened. So just yesterday, some 20 Israeli Air Force jets, this is according to the IDF, dropped more than 65 munitions on Houthi targets in Sana'a, marking the highest number of munitions used in a single Israeli strike so far in Yemen. This is the 19th time, kind of got there fast, right? 19th time that Israel has attacked the Houthis so far. In all, they say 7 different targets were struck, and they've got some imagery that I'll show here of the different targets that they went after. That includes 5 military headquarters where Houthi operatives were gathered, 2 weapon storage facilities, and more. Now, what I've seen coming out of Yemen at this point is that at least 8 people were confirmed to have been killed. No secondary data or confirmation from any other sources as to the results of that strike. Now, while the Houthi attacks kind of got the focus of a lot of attention in recent days, operations are continuing in the Gaza Strip. This is Operation Gideon's Chariots 2, as the IDF has moved into with a goal to clear Gaza City of Hamas. And we've actually seen a pretty significant uptick in ground combat operations in recent days. The Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Zamir, said, quote, we are operating in the Gaza Strip with a large number of troops with a focus on striking Gaza City to create conditions for the release of the hostages and for Hamas's decisive defeat. Most of Gaza's population has already left Gaza City, and we are moving them southward for their safety. I call on Gazan residents, rise up and break away from Hamas. It is responsible for your suffering. The war and the suffering will end if Hamas releases the hostages and relinquishes its weapons. A few notes there. First off, and we've hammered it in videos as of late, it's not clear that there is a military solution to the recovery of the remaining hostages. We just haven't seen it yet. It's hard to believe that just putting more troops on the ground in Gaza City is going to be the solution for that. It is very, very difficult, if that's not clear already at this point, to conduct a military operation in Gaza to successfully extract these hostages alive. It's not for lack of effort. It is just very, very challenging to do. One of the issues there is we have seen that when the IDF or any Israeli forces get close to living hostages, we have seen evidence that Hamas has executed them. So Israel's in this bind of, we need to go in and get the hostages, but if we get too close and we're detected at any point, they're just going to kill the hostages and renders that operation pointless. So even trying to do it, if you don't even get there, you could end up indirectly resulting in the death of the hostages you're trying to save. It is incredibly complex. Now, while all of this is going on, we are getting a lot more footage coming out of not just Hamas showing attacks on IDF soldiers, but also a lot more coming out of the IDF. And just a couple days ago, they released this footage here showing Hamas moving into the Shifa hospital in Gaza City and carrying out attacks against IDF troops. So grainy footage, I understand, but what you see here are individuals that the IDF says are Hamas militants moving into the Shifa hospital. And then as the video plays, you can see clear gunfire emanating from some of the higher levels of that structure. It's not new, unfortunately. It's not unique. This is a rather standard practice in Gaza and has been for some time. Now, shifting to more of the diplomatic realm here, we are seeing a widespread recognition of the Palestinian state. Now, as a quick note, we have 157 out of 193 UN member states that so far recognize Palestine, as the state of Palestine, as a sovereign nation. So it's not like these are the first ones. In fact, I think that's around 80% of the member states of the UN do recognize Palestine today. But we saw a pretty significant, some notable moves here in the last couple days, citing Al Jazeera and some reporting they did on this. They said France, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Andorra, and Belgium have formally recognized a Palestinian state at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly that took place this week. They joined Canada, Australia, and Portugal, as well as the United Kingdom, which announced its recognition on Sunday. Quote, and this is UK Prime Minister Starmer said, quote, "In the face of the growing horror in the Middle East, we are acting to keep alive the possibility of peace and a two-state solution." Now, in terms of what this means, not a lot, really. And there was a great quote in here from someone that said, quote, "It brings hope, but doesn't necessarily bring a future." And I think that's probably the best way to view this. And we'll get into some details here in a second. But according to Al Jazeera, they say recognizing Palestine strengthens its global standing, boosts its capacity to hold Israel authorities responsible for their occupation, and increases pressure on Western powers to work towards a two-state solution. Specifically, it would allow Palestinians to open embassies with full diplomatic status, engage in trade agreements, gain support at international forums, and approach the International Criminal Court, or ICC. Now, in terms of responses here, as expected, the Israeli response was negative. Netanyahu's office put out a statement saying, quote, "The shameful capitulation of some leaders to Palestinian terror does not obligate Israel in any way. There will be no Palestinian state." And then as he left Israel traveling to the United Nations, he said, quote, "I will denounce those leaders who, instead of denouncing the murderers, rapists, and child burners, want to give them a state in the heart of the land of Israel. This will not happen." And this has been a topic here in the United States as well. So we've got a couple clips, starting with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, when she was asked about this the other day, saying the view of the administration right now is that recognizing the Palestinian state is a reward for Hamas. Here's Caroline Leavitt.
As for all of these Western nations that are recognizing a Palestinian state, the president has been very clear. He disagrees with this decision. He spoke about that in the UK, standing right next to his friend, Prime Minister Starmer. And he feels this does not do anything to release the hostages, which is the primary goal right now in Gaza, does nothing to end this conflict and bring this war to a close. And frankly, he believes it's a reward to Hamas. So he believes these decisions are just more talk and not enough action from some of our friends and allies, and I think you'll hear him talk about that tomorrow at the UN.
Then adding to that, at the United Nations, we had a side meeting here between French President Emmanuel Macron and U.S. President Trump, where Trump was also asked about the recognition of the Palestinian state. And this setting is notable because France, of course, just did move to recognize Palestine. But Trump, in his statements here, says you can't do that. It honors Hamas. It's just not something that you can do after October 7th. Here we go.
Well, I think it honors Hamas, and you can't do that because of October 7th. You just can't do that. But we want our hostages back, and we don't want them back in ones and twos and take the next 2 years to do it. We were the ones that got the hostages back, and I always said, I told Steve, I told Marco, I was always saying the last hostages are going to be the toughest ones. But you can't honor them by doing anything like you suggest. All you can do is say, we want our hostages back, and we want the war to end. We're going to want it to end. But you always have to remember, people forget October 7th was one of the most savage days in the history of the world. There's never been anything like that. We're talking about babies being sliced in half. You're talking about, young children having their heads chopped off. You can't forget that.
And then turning to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who took a bit of a different tone. Again, the stance from the United States government is no, this is a bad idea. But Rubio got into how, yes, this is recognizing Hamas. That actually makes it harder to get them to the negotiating table. Like, it rewards them in a way to where it's going to be harder to negotiate some sort of end settlement to this war. He also kind of called out some of these Western European leaders saying, look, this doesn't do anything. It's just a vanity project. Here you go.
There is no Palestinian state, no matter how many papers they put out. And the only time there'll ever be one is if there is a negotiation with Israel, which right now is impossible because they have a war going on with Hamas, a terrorist group that butchered over 2,000 people on October 7th, just almost 2 years ago. And so as long as that's going on, the whole thing is irrelevant. It's almost a vanity project for a couple of these world leaders who want to be relevant, but it really makes no difference. Now, I will say the impact it has had is it actually derailed, it made Hamas, talks that were going on, it made it even harder to get Hamas to enter into concessions that might have brought this to an end. And look, we think there's a window of opportunity right now to pursue it. The only leader in the world, really, that can sort of broker that or bring that together is President Trump. That's why every country in the region, and frankly, every country in the world, including many of those involved in this recognition effort, are begging the president to get involved in this issue.
All right, so with all of that, I think the big thing to keep an eye on here in the coming days is President Trump and some in the U.S. administration are kind of floating the idea that there may be a negotiation in the works between Hamas and Israel. Not hearing a lot of that from Israel, not hearing a lot of that from Hamas, but the White House has been putting that out in recent days, kind of teasing that we might actually be close this time. I don't know. We've heard that quite often in the past, so I'm not super optimistic that anything is actually going to happen, but we should expect some sort of statement to that end here in the next couple days. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.